And from my expectation, it should be live already. So hi everyone. Let's start. I think I see like 40 people and keep joining YouTube. So I want to welcome everyone to the FHIR meetup number 3, which we do virtually. Today we're gonna speak about structured data capture. I'll be hosting it together with Ilya Beda, with
Hi.
Beda Software.
Yeah.
But maybe let's start with introduction rounds, and then we'll talk a little bit about logistics and what presentations we're gonna have. So I'm Pavel Smirnov. I'm the CEO of Health Samurai. Lloyd, please.
Hi, Lloyd McKenzie. I'm a senior consultant with Jevity, and I do a lot of FHIR stuff.
Ilya.
Hi, I'm Ilya. I'm CTO of Beda Software. My company is working on consulting people who would like to create FHIR first applications, and that's what I'm doing, basically.
Rene.
Hi, I'm Rene Villalon. I am the CEO for Appline, and today we're going to be talking about a data-driven approach for clinical application development using FHIR.
Guys, go on, please. Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Lynch. I'm a technical lead of a project run by Dr. Clem McDonald at the National Library of Medicine in the U.S. And I'll be talking about some of the FHIR tools we've been working on.
Stoyan, please, and Scott.
Yeah, hi, I'm Stoyan Halkaliev from Berlin, Germany. I am founder and CEO of University Institute, and we do also a lot of FHIR stuff, and I'll be talking about some of the tools that we have built during the course of our development.
And Scott, please.
Hi, I'm the CTO and lead dev of Atmodyne, and I'll be doing the live demo portion of our presentation on data-driven rapid form development for healthcare using FHIR.
So yeah, so today is a really great meetup because I expect a lot of live demos, and perhaps many people will find maybe even some useful tools for their own projects, because structured data capture, even if it might sound scary a little bit, it actually provides a lot of usability for developers to create forms for capturing data from different users, physicians, patients, and the way FHIR guides how to structure it. I'm sure that we'll see a lot of again cool presentations today. We'll start with Lloyd, who will give us introduction actually to what SDC is, and much better than I'm trying to explain, I'm sure. So Lloyd, if you're ready, please take over.
Alrighty. I can find the right window. All right, these are old slides. This is no longer February, and this is actually a subset of presentation that I gave in Australia. But the intention is to just give a background on where questionnaire fits into FHIR in general, and what the structured data capture project is specifically. And a bit of the content here actually comes from Brian Postlethwaite. These slides are licensed under Creative Commons, so long as you say thank you to Brian and me, you're welcome to use them yourselves. I will arrange for a link to get added to the YouTube channel for people to get access to them after the fact. So why do we use forms in FHIR? There are a whole lot of resources that capture information of interest to clinicians and administrators and others. and questionnaire response lets us capture all of that data with a single simple data structure. And so for user-facing applications, particularly simple ones that don't necessarily want to support a large number of resources, and particularly don't necessarily want to keep up as those resources evolve, because most of the clinical stuff of interest is not yet locked down in normative, questionnaire and questionnaire response are appealing. In addition to providing a mechanism for standard data capture, forms also give you a nice mechanism for display. So you can use forms in two ways: to prompt users to gather the information that is of interest to you, but also to take a whole bunch of information and expose it in a standardized rendering format. There are obviously other ways to do that in FHIR. You can have a smart app or stuff like that, but forms are a way that healthcare professionals are used to interacting with data. We, however, have limitations in terms of what questionnaire responses can do. You're not going to get standard information using forms. Everybody's forms tend to vary, and even within an organization, your questionnaires tend to evolve over time, so that data captured against different versions of questionnaires and against different questionnaires is not necessarily going to be comparable. As well, forms do not let you query based on the data, because the data can appear pretty much anywhere, and the meaning of the data can actually be influenced by answers to other questions. It's very difficult to come up with a standardized way of querying information out of a form. So what we typically have in the questionnaire space is that we use forms to capture data, either when you're using a simple client, or you just want really tight control over exactly how information is gathered. You want to know exactly what the question text is, you know exactly what order things are asked in, you know exactly what the choices of possible answers are, and therefore your data tends to be more comparable and reliable. But once you've got a populated questionnaire response, you then extract that information into quite often just observations, but sometimes medication statement or family history or allergy intolerance or patient for demographic information or whatever else might be appropriate for the data that you're trying to capture. And then you have a linkage between the questionnaire response, which is your original source of truth, and those other resources using provenance, so you can have traceability in terms of where the data came from. And sometimes you will pass around that original source of truth in the questionnaire response, but quite often you'll just pass around the observations and possibly the provenance that shows where it came from. Structured data capture is a project that's been running 5 years now. 2 different versions of the project. First was funded by the U.S. Office of National Coordinator. The more recent one is funded by the National Library of Medicine. And the focus of SDC is to take the generic questionnaire and questionnaire response applications or resources that let you do pretty much anything, but provide very little guidance in terms of how to do things, and are focused very much on what are the simple ways of using questionnaires and questionnaire responses, and provide guidance on how to use forms to do all of the wild and wonderful things that we often need to do in the healthcare space. And there's 6 major areas that we try to cover. So the first is workflow. What are the standard types of systems involved in questionnaires? Those that create questionnaires, those that fill them out, those that receive questionnaire submissions. Also, how do you ask for a form to be completed, and how do you track whether or not somebody is doing that as asked or not? There's a whole bunch of things that we would like to be able to do in displaying forms. So we want to be able to have grids. We want to be able to say whether you want something to be a radio button or a drop down or some sort of list box, check boxes, whatever. You want to be able to guide behavior. So you want to be able to control what are the allowed values. You want to be able to set ranges on numeric values. You want to be able to manage navigation so that certain questions, certain answers turn on and off based on previous answers within the form. You want to be able to control what happens to the form once it's complete. Where does it get sent? And are there any rules, such as you have to provide an answer for either question 3 or answer question 5 before you can submit the form. One of the things that we're trying to do at SDC as well is automatically populate forms. I'm sure all of you have experienced the joy of going into a healthcare setting and receiving a form and getting to answer for the 278th time a whole bunch of questions about your name and address and phone number and next of kin and allergies and current medications and all of those other things, when that data typically already exists, maybe on your Apple phone, maybe in your personal health record, or maybe in your provider's EHR, and being able to fill in the answers to some or maybe even most of the questions with the data that's already there, and then just have you review it and say, is this still accurate? Is your phone number still this number? Are these still your current medications? And of course, data being what it is and life being what it is, some of the information is probably either wrong or out of date, and you can fix it. But you saved yourself a whole lot of time, and you've also probably solved or mitigated the problem that we often have when we fill out forms, is that we don't remember everything or we don't get it all right. And so having information already pre-populated is helpful. On the other side, once you have that completed form, you want that information then to be available for use in FHIR as observations, so that you can query them, so that you can run statistics, so that information is in as medication statements, so that you can do drug-drug interaction checking and allergy checking and all those other things. And so being able to automatically extract is another key important thing. And the final thing that SDC covers is adaptive forms, which are forms where when you go to fill out the questionnaire, you don't actually get to see the questionnaire. You know what the URL is, but there's some sort of a black box that handles asking you the questions. And sort of asks you the first question, and you give an answer, and then it, based on what you answer, it decides what the next question is going to be and asks you that. And that is attractive from a couple of perspectives. One is for really, really simple clients that can't handle complex behaviors that tell them what question or what to enable versus disable. That can be offloaded to an external system that manages that for them. It also means that you can protect your intellectual property. So if you have a whole lot of IP tied up into your questionnaire design, things like promise, where they don't necessarily want to show you what is all the logic that governs what questions get asked to whom in what circumstances, then you don't have to. You just sort of get prompted one question at a time, fill in your answers, and at the end, you typically end up with a score. Trying to not take too much time, so I'm going to skip past these detailed slides on workflow. You can, and some of the other capabilities, you can certainly dig into those yourselves with slides that I'll share. Timeline for publication is taking much longer than we hoped it would. There is a draft of structured data capture available from the HL7 website. If you go to the bottom of the FHIR homepage and click on the link for implementation guides, structured data capture is one of the first ones listed because we were around really early. But the intention is that the next release of SDC will probably get published sometime in this coming September or October. At one point, that was going to be September or October last year, but that didn't happen. But we have completed all of our reconciliation, and we've completed lots of examples, and we're basically just tidying up, making sure we got all the changes applied and doing QA. So it will be coming out relatively soon. And we will be having Connectathon track at the upcoming HL7 working group meeting. It is virtual like everything else, and therefore also pretty cheap. So if you're interested in experimenting with any of the functions that I talked about, population or extraction, or just rendering complex forms or managing complex form behavior, adaptive forms, all of those things will be up for test at that Connectathon, and we would certainly welcome anybody who wants to come and participate to do that. Did that cover what you were hoping to have covered, Pavel?
Sure. Let's. So what you guys gonna do with the FHIR Connectathon? What's the plan for the next session?
What we typically do at our Connectathons is we say these are the different things that SDC does. If you're interested in doing any of them, show up and we will try to find you participants to play with. What we're particularly interested in is some of the work that we did last Connectathon on multi-questionnaire forms, so the ability of one questionnaire to reference another questionnaire and provide reuse. We've done a fair bit of design there, and so we're curious to see how that works out. We're also always interested in new examples of forms. So people who have complex forms and they want to see, can we represent this in FHIR? More specifically, can we represent this in SDC? We're very happy to have those come, and we're getting more and more applications that are doing some of the questionnaire functions, whether that's form data entry tools or form design tools, and you get a chance to see some of those today. So if you have anything like, excuse me, if you have anything like that, then bring it, and we will test you with all sorts of different forms and see how forms render on different tools, and find places where the specification isn't necessarily as clear as it might be and where we're interpreting it differently, and see if we can come up with a standard way so that we have a greater likelihood of somebody can design a form without knowing what tool is going to display it, and then pass that to a different client and have it both rendered properly and have all the rules enforced, and still be able to populate it and extract the information as designed in the form.
Yeah. Thank you, Lloyd. It was very detailed description of what we are usually doing on Connectathons.
So I understand somebody can come to the Connectathon with the complex forms like on the paper, and maybe leave in a couple of days with electronic version of these forms with all the logic, rules, validations, default values, stuff like this.
They can if they're willing to do some work. We won't do it for them, but we will absolutely help them through the process. And there are tools that will make it much easier. Depending on the form, we may have to do some things beyond what the tool's capabilities are, because I'm not aware of any of the tools yet that can support all of the extensions that are defined in SDC, although some of them are getting closer. But the right people will absolutely be around the table, so that if you get stuck on representing any particular piece of information, or how do I make a control that looks like that, we will either be there to tell you how to do it, or we'll say, yeah, we haven't seen something like that before. Here's the process to submit a change request, and we will see if we can get that in for the next release, and tell you how to do it with your own extension in the meantime.
I think it's an attractive actually proposition. So when is the next FHIR Connectathon happening?
First week of September, I believe. That's way too far away from it to be in my head. But it will, as always, come sooner than I would like it to. Yeah, so the Connectathon runs the 9th through the 11th of September. Kickoff is the afternoon of the 9th, and because we are virtual, and because we have folks who are in North America and in Germany and in Russia and in Australia and sort of everywhere in between, we will be running the full 48 hours. We expect there will be people online talking, communicating, testing stuff throughout that duration. And so wherever you are, basically dial in when you happen to be awake, and we will be very happy to have you there. It'll be a little bit more, a little bit simpler than it might have been in the past, where people sort of had to switch time zones and were up at unpleasant times of the day. I mean, you're certainly welcome to be up at unpleasant times of the day anyhow, because there's cool stuff happening. But we will do our best to schedule joint discussions at a time when most of the participants are awake or easily awake, even if it might be slightly early morning or slightly late evening. But the work will happen throughout the full time period.
Okay, any questions from other speakers for Lloyd? And let me check what questions we have in the meetup chat. Any questions, Stoyan, Ilya, Rene? No?
My stuff was all introductory, so they should already know it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there is not much. There is a question to ask, a link to connect it on in the meetup, so I'll post it later. I think next is Ilya's presentation, right? Ilya, are you next,
yeah.
right? Okay, so please take over.
Lloyd, could you? Oh yeah. Now I'm able to share my screen. So yeah. Okay. So let's move to a bit more practical stuff. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do some live demos today, but I try to present kind of fancy slides, yeah, and tell you how we're using structure data capturing in QUESTIONNAIR Health project. Yeah. For the last 5 years, I'm working in the healthcare. I'm passionate about FHIR, about creating next-gen healthcare application with FHIR, and today a couple of examples what you could achieve using SDC implementation guide, how it could expand FHIR and provide you more useful features. So the schema you can see right now, it's very simple, and I think that if we are talking about some simple app that used FHIR, it's something like user interface, and you could put some data or load some data from FHIR server. It looks very simple. You're using any kind of tools to create your user interfaces and just interact with sending some data. Then your application may become a bit complex with more details. In some cases, it can become a multi-tenant application, and when you have to adjust the user interface for a specific tenant, that's when you got some issues. So let's discuss a bit more details about QUESTIONNAIR Health project and what issues we faced when we start making it a kind of multi-tenant. So it's a New Zealand startup. The main goal of this project to provide FHIR and SNOMED compliant electronic health records. But since it's a startup, everything is changing, and now we are focusing on implementing fast check-in. So lots of hospitals still use papers for check-in, and we are going to resolve this issue and make the workflow paperless. We have multiple hospitals. In each hospital, there is their own check-in forms, and also in one hospital may be different kind of tracking forms, and even more complex. For example, some specific practitioner would like to have his own or her own branded form with very specific number of questions, and we have to adjust UI based on client requirements. So we decided that we will use questionnaire, and it may look very simple, like we download some questionnaire from FHIR server, then we display it as a UI and proceed through the SDC specification, exactly as Lloyd discussed previously. But we faced some issues that I would like to share with you, and maybe that will help you in building your application. So first of all, when we're talking about structured data capturing, we're usually talking about web application. But in QS Health, we are creating mobile application for iOS and Android. We are creating mobile application for clinics that runs on the iPad, and also we are reusing the same code on patient front end on iPhone and Android phones. So we are not talking just about web customizable forms. Now we are talking about universal customizable forms that should be able to launch on any kind of platform, both web and mobile, both iOS and Android. And there are lots of technique how we can share code across multiple platforms. I will not stay long on this portion of presentation, but anyway, I will provide some insights. There is a well-known technique when you are embed a kind of web view in your mobile application, and this web view pretends to be a native UI. I personally dislike this approach, and also we have a very strong requirement to utilize as much as possible from native experience and have lots of fancy animation, because it still matters, and it's always better when your UI is very responsive, fast, and work very nice. So we decided that we need a better tool than just a web view. And finally, we finished with this application stack. We are using TypeScript, React for creating web application, and React Native to create mobile applications. That allows us to share code across all platforms, and this is how we resolve the technical part. Now let's proceed with SDC. I think it will be more interested for most meetup participants. And first of all, let's provide me some explanation about terminology. I will use abbreviation ACC. It's a kind of government insurance provider in the New Zealand. If you're not familiar with New Zealand healthcare, it's not a problem. Just you can assume that ACC is any kind of insurance provider you know. Yeah. So let's talk about the check-in form template that we are using. It's a bit more complex, but we can. I simplified stuff, and it looks pretty well, and more complex stuff are not required here. So we have three portions of the form. The first one is demographic data of the patient, where we need to capture some regular data like first name, last name, maybe date of birth, some contacts, everything that you could find in patient resources. The third portion of the form is patient portion of ACC form that's required in case of appointment caused by injury or accident. And in the middle of the form, like in the second part, we have this organization-specific number of questions. So we have to combine this form from three portions, and one of them is organization specific. Then, when we process and check-in, we have to copy both questions and answers to specific ACC questionnaire that used by practitioner to add some additional notes regarding diagnosis, regarding ability patient to walk, and manage it as a separated questionnaire, because ACC strictly define number of fields that we should fill, and so yeah. How this works? So I am providing some insights about data flow, how we populate data and extract. For the demographic data, it's pretty simple. We just need a patient resource. We could extract data from patient, displayed it form, then sync to the patient resources back. The same approach used for conditions, because in the check-in data we are need to capture information about previous treatments, diagnosis, all other stuff. So we're using condition restores, and everything fine here as well. But we have some issues with the ACC data and ACC claims. So ACC claim is very specific. It is not mapped well to any FHIR resources. So we have to manage it somehow outside of the FHIR. And it's an issue, because we can't use SDC specification for non-FHIR data. However, we find some workarounds, and 8box help us a lot to resolve these issues with some custom data inside questionnaires. And let's see how it works. Let's start with data population. So there are three kinds of data population defined in the SDC implementation guide. I decided that we need to use FHIR pass powered population as the most powered one. We are using some extensions like launch context, source query, and initial expression, and let's see how population flow works. So for any questionnaire, the starting required parameter defined in launch context is a patient. So to populate data, we need to get the patient data first. Once we get the patient data, we already can fill all demographics details on the form, but we also need some conditions. To load condition, we're using source query that defines FHIR bundle requests that downloads all related to patient conditions, and then using the FHIR pass, we extract this data and represent it in the form. This approach works well for non-FHIR SDC data as well, because we can define some custom operation inside bundle request, and 8box will load some non-FHIR data along with FHIR data in one request, so we can process it with FHIR pass. Yeah. Then let's discuss how we extract data from form back to the FHIR. Again, there are three possible options how we can extract data following SDC implementation guide. I prefer mapper-based approach, and SDC is promoting FHIR mapping language as a tool to do mapping, but it's not yet a common skill. You can find it in the specification, and personally, unfortunately, I didn't find some good, useful implementation of FHIR mapping language. If you have some please share links. I will very appreciate it. Let's discuss how mapper-based expansion works. So we have a piece of software called mapper. We have a questionnaire response, and then we need to extract some data from this questionnaire response and transform it to a number of FHIR resources. If we are strictly following SDC specification, we can't extract some non-FHIR non-FHIR data like ACC claims details. So I start. This is why I decided not to use FHIR mapping language and use another similar tool that exists in the 8-box. It is JUTE. JUTE is open source mapping language that allow to map any data to FHIR resources. How it works? We can take any structured data. It could be a questionnaire response or any third-party API, not FHIR compatible, because JUTE works only with the data. Then, as a result of the mapper, we are creating a batch or transaction bundle that will be executed, and all resources, all operations defined in this bundle will be applied and update the data in the database. Also in JUTE, there is embedded FHIR path that helps a lot when you are working with complex data such a questionnaire response. Here you can see an example of JUTE mapping that update patient resource. As you can see, we are defining the bundle, and the one nice feature of JUTE that when you define some resources, you don't need to describe like step-by-step logic what field should be mapped to another field. You just create a shape of the project and inject data like in the placeholders using some tools like FHIR path or direct object attribute access. So this is how we create mappings. And again, when we need to work with some custom items, we can call any custom API request in this batch bundle. So this is how we manage something that's not in FHIR. Finally, when I talk about the questionnaire that consists of lots of different parts, we faced issues that we have lots of copy paste, and we need something to gather questionnaires on fly. It's so I start searching what exists in the SDC specification, and there is one feature that we tested on previous connectathon. It's called modularized questionnaires. It's a total new feature of SDC specification. In this feature, the new assemble operation is introduced, and also introduce some extensions that allow embed one questionnaire to another. And once you execute assemble operation on questionnaires, the all embedded questionnaires will be embedded inside its inside. Yeah. So I implemented this new assemble operation, and that's how I resolve issues with creating a large questionnaire from multiple pieces. Unfortunately, I face a lot of issues with integrating assemble, populate, and extract operation. They not fit well to each other. I think it's a good topic to discuss on a further connectathon. I hope I will prepare some examples and we will discuss it. Yeah, here you can see a link to prefix-based modularized questionnaire that I was contributed on the previous connectathon. Please review it if you are interested in it. And here is a link to 8-box SDC implementation as open source tools that we are using in QA Health. And if you are interested in 8-box and SDC, you could review it. Even if you are just interested in SDC only, you can review the code and see how we're implementing extract, populate, and assemble operation. Yeah, I think that's all. So I hope you got something interesting from my presentation. If you have some questions, feel free to ask me. I am ready to answer it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ilya. Questions from other speakers, please?
I had a question. Maybe you mentioned it, but I didn't quite catch it. What is ACC? And I'm curious about what kind of data is in there that wouldn't fit to a FHIR resource.
So ACC is an insurance provider, and they need some specific data regarding the accident that happened with a patient, like where it happened. Does this accident happen on a public road, and all other very specific data. So it's not able to map to FHIR because it's lots of very specific questions regarding patient work and some. Also, they're using their own specific terminology, so I can't find a way to map it to FHIR.
Thank you. More questions for Ilya, Lloyd, René?
It's definitely very interesting. I think we're going to be taking a closer look at what Ilya did there, and it sounds very aligned to what we're trying to achieve as well.
Yeah, please join the next connectathon. Maybe I will find some extra time to polish my open source tools and participate in connectathon, not like a regular participant, but provide something for testing. Yeah.
Stoyan, any questions from you? No? Okay, let's move on. I'm sorry?
All good.
Okay, so next we have presentation from Paul. Paul, please take over the screen share and everything.
Right. Just all right, so I'm going to be switching between my PowerPoint presentation and some live demos. So I'm just going to share my desktop. All right. So this is a group of tools that have been, I think, probably entirely the ideas of Dr. Clem McDonald, who's running the project. And although I'm presenting the tools, it's only a small percentage is my work. I work with a very talented team of developers. So, the topics for today, I've tried to pick ones with an SDC focus. So we have a form rendering widget called LHC Forms, and a Smart on FHIR application which uses that one, and I can demonstrate some of the more the fancier SDC features. And then we have a questionnaire builder, and if there's time, we have a questionnaire viewer, which might be of interest to some people. So the last questionnaire viewer is an application also. So, but all the things that are rendering forms and what I'm about to show are they are all using the LHC forms to render the questionnaire. Okay. So LHC forms is open source, and it's there's a ready-to-use version of it, which is hosted on a web server, which I'll show in a little bit. So you can just sort of plug it in.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe you're sharing the wrong screen.
Are you seeing my slides?
No.
No, we see a desktop explorer.
Interesting. Okay, let me. Okay, I will. That's going to make it difficult if I can't. Maybe let's see. Let me try. Advanced. Let's see. Oh, screen. Oh, yes. Right. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. It was probably my remote desktop that I shared. Now can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Sorry about that. So anyway, I think this is the first real slide. So right. So the documentation. So the LHC forms renderer supports a lot of SDC features. Well, actually, I think SDC is huge, so I can't say it supports most or even more than 50 is probably a small percentage of, but I think it covers a lot of the normal use cases, the more common use cases. And it supports things like pre-population via observations and FHIR path-based calculation and data extraction. So I'll show some of those. Okay, here we go. So this is the documentation website, and also has some demos there. The renderer it makes use of these other two packages, LHC, which I'm not going to demo, but it's a package we also wrote based on the units of measure. It's a unified code for units of measure is what it stands for, which is a format for expressing units, which can be it's unambiguous and can be exchanged by computers, and so you can write software that will validate the expressions and convert from one unit expression to another. So that's useful if you're bringing in observations into your form. You might have to convert the unit that the observation is in. If somebody entered it in pounds and you need kilograms for your form, you can convert them. And it's also using FHIR path.js, which I'm also not going to demo, but that's what runs our FHIR path. So it can import and export both STU3 and R4 questionnaires. And so let me give a simple, this is the simplest demo I could come up with for FHIR. It will launch. Okay. All right, so this is, so over here on the side, move my Zoom windows out of the way, you can see this is the rendered form over here. And to render that form, basically included a style sheet from our website, which is hosting the pre-built, ready-to-use versions. So that's this website here, clinicaltables.nlm.nih.gov, and then we have almost all the versions of L-forms going back for quite a ways. And then you include a script tag for the source of the renderer, and then there's a separate script tag if you want to use FHIR, which I guess most people here would, but you can pick which version of FHIR that you're interested in. So R4 or STU3 would go in this part of the URL. And then you specify a place to put the form, and this button is just an extra button I added to show the questionnaire response when this form gets filled in. So then what the JavaScript looks like, this is the JavaScript here contains the definition of this form, which is very simple. It just has one item, which is a string field for a person's name. And then this is the code to take that form and add it to the page. As I was putting this demo together, I realized this is this really just be one function call. I don't know why we have it in 3 steps. Just didn't get to it, I guess. But that's on my to-do list now to make that one function call instead of 3 parts. And then this is just shows how you get the questionnaire response once the user's filled in the form. So if you just type in a name, we can click on the show questionnaire response, and then we can see the generated questionnaire response, which has the name that the user filled in. So back to the slides. All right. So then we have a more full-featured demo application here, and I'm going to do, let's see, already 6 minutes in. I'm going to do, probably we'll skip this first demo. This first demo is the family health portrait form at this website. Just the point is that it can do, the renderer can handle groups of things, nested items, items with units, single select and multi-select lists, repeating items, and also skip logic with enable when. So you can, based on one answers, the answer to one question, you can skip other questions or sections. So there's, okay, so let me get to the PHR form and I'll just try and show that one quickly. Lost my mouse, there we go. Okay, so this is, all right. So, so here's this is the LHC forms rigid rendering. So we have sample forms at the top, and I just picked the personal health record. And so these are using the item control G table. So if you look at the questionnaire version of this form, and let's see if we can see this here. Yeah. So this is the item control part of this. So it's saying that this item, which is medical conditions, has this extension, and this is the item control URL. If the window were wider, you could see that URL going off there. And or actually, we would see it here. And it's saying that it's a G table, which means a horizontal table. So the fields are laid out instead of one after the other. They're laid out in a group with a table, and you can then see if you add one thing, you can add another, and so you get repeating rows of these questions. So that's one extension that's part of SDC. Then we have some limited support for rendering XHTML, which is we allow XHTML in help text. So here's an example of that. Okay, so if you scroll down, you can see, so this is the, it's like a pre-LASIK form for eyes. So it's, it wants you to look at these images and then answer questions about them. So this is actually help text for that. And I think I've got, do I have that up? Yes, okay. Let's pop over here. So this is what that item looks like. So so there's the text of the header, and then it has an item which defines itself as help for the previous item, and then that item contains an extension which contains HTML, which gets rendered and pulls up the image. Now, I think in a more, so this particular implementation on this form is requiring that the image be on the same server from which the application that's showing the form lives, which might not always be the case. A better way to do this probably would be to make the image data be contained inside the form with maybe a binary resource, rather than just having a link to it in HTML. Okay. Let me get to this. So this is our another application. So the previous application doesn't connect to a FHIR server. It's mostly a demo of the LHC forms renderer. But without the FHIR connection, you can't do pre-population and extraction. So we built this other application, which is a Smart on FHIR app. It launches and connects to our FHIR servers at NLM. oh, I didn't pick the right user, but let me go back. Let's see. So not every user has data that will show up as pre-population. That's the problem. Okay, so oh, it's still, okay. All right, well, I will save some data and then we'll show it. So, so if we go to, here's the US Surgeon General Family Health Portrait again. What this has done is it's used, so it's filled in the name and the birth date, and it got that from launch context. It defined launch context for a variable named patient to pull in the patient resource. And then for the name, they used a initial expression extension with some FHIR path to go into the patient variable and put together a name string to put in the field. And similarly for the birth date. So let me just go to another demo. Sorry, this fell so fast. This one demonstrates, well, it would demonstrate pre-population. So let me just put in some numbers here. What you're seeing here with the BMI calculation is a calculated expression extension, filling that in. So if we say, we can save as the questionnaire response and do an extraction into observations. So these three fields are marked up, or at least the weight and height are marked up with observation link period, which tells it to go fetch the most recent observation for this user and pull it into the form. So that's what I'm going to do now. And the reason it didn't show up filled in before, I'm just going to switch to another form and come back. Well, that one had data. Okay. So now I loaded in the blank form. It looks like the saved form, but I loaded in the blank form and it went back with the observation link period and filled in these values. Okay. And I think so anyway, so that was using those three extensions. And we have some other extensions that we support from SDC. In addition to, I think in the preceding form, you saw a unit next to the item for the weight and height. That was done with the questionnaire unit extension. There's also a questionnaire unit option if you have an item of type quantity. So the user can specify both the unit and the value that they're putting in the form. So we do that one as well. There's a questionnaire builder, and I think maybe I should stop, but there's a URL for it there. You can play with it. It will allow you to import. If you're familiar with the link has all these questions and panels defined. You can pull those in and build forms based on those or make your own questions. Supports many of the features of LHC forms, not quite all of them. So there are a few things you might have to sort of edit in by hand, but it will generate a FHIR questionnaire for you when you're done building the form. The last thing is we have a questionnaire reviewer. The purpose of this is that if you just have a questionnaire and you want to show it, maybe you want to link to it from some website so you can show what your questionnaire looks like. It's not really for data capture, it's just so you can display the questionnaire. You can use this URL, put in a parameter queue with a URL that will go to that will point to, like in this case, it's pointing to our FHIR server to open up a questionnaire. So if you click on it, it should open up and show it. Yeah, and if you don't provide a URL, then it will ask you for one when you get to this page. So it's kind of a very fast overview of what I intended to cover, but I guess I should stop there. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. I have a question. I know that you are focused on implementing as much as possible on the front-end part of the application. However, there is another option when we're talking about population and extraction. It makes sense to implement this portion of the ACC on the backend part of the application. Could you provide some insights from your perspective, what advantages and disadvantages for such approach?
You might end up with a simpler client, maybe a lighter weight client if you do the extraction on the back end. It didn't. I mean, so we already needed to let the user get at the data. So since we're doing this rendering on the client in the browser, so that the browser just, it has the LHC forms package, and then it has the questionnaire definition. So we already needed a way to provide a way for the user to get the data that users filled in. So it's a questionnaire response. So doing that, it wasn't that much more effort to do at least the observation-based extraction, which is what we've implemented.
Thank you.
Any other questions from other speakers, maybe?
So just wanted to point out the base URL for our website that has all our, I guess I probably was not showing this slide when I thought it was showing it, but this is the main URL for our has links to all our tools and stuff. It's lhcforms.lm.nih.gov.
Also, I have one more question. So maybe it's for the all participant. So what do you think about creating a kind of specification test cases that could be used to validate SDC specification, how they match the implementation guide? Because lots of people are working on implementing the SDC, but I can't find good testing tools for it. So what do you think about creating something?
Like a suite of tools to test the coverage of the SDC specification, like what parts are implemented or supported?
Yeah, something like this.
In some parts are relatively easy to test. Things like population and extraction, you can test pretty easily because you can define a known set of data and just see whether the instances do what they're supposed to. But testing something like form control or all of the rendering capabilities, it's really hard to automate that. And some parts of user interface design are innately subjective. So it doesn't mean that we couldn't do, I mean, one of the example instances in the specification coming to ballot is sort of a tortured case that tries to cover off all of the weird and wild and wonderful things that you can do in terms of rendering and control. And so you could feed that to an application and see whether A, it blows up, and B, whether it seems to be behaving somewhat reasonably in terms of what the behaviors are supposed to be, but it's not going to be a super automated process other than the blow up piece. That's easy to check.
Yeah, thank you.
Easy, except if it's not automated, it becomes harder. You have to test 100 cases by hand. But.
Any other questions? Stoyan, René?
I like that idea, though, that some sort of suite, because that's a piece that I have a hard time keeping track of, is what parts we've implemented and how extensive the support is.
It's not even necessary to be completely automatically testable. It would be enough to have just a set of questionnaires that a collection for particular features, which we can download and then put in the tools. Then everyone can publish the results himself. So even side-by-side comparing of the rendering is mostly enough if you have the same set of starting conditions.
Yeah, makes
Maybe
sense.
that's a topic for the next connectathon.
Yeah, it seems that maybe SDC will be again delayed because we will find more and more useful features that we would like to have. Yeah, it's a good idea not to try to automate everything. Yeah, it's great because I worked on implementing FHIR pass, and it's nice when you have a detailed test suite. It will be nice to have a kind of predefined questionnaires to see how different, for example, form builders represent the same questionnaire.
All right. So if no other questions, we have a nice demo. Thank you. On YouTube, and guys are asking how do we post questions. Just type them into the chat. So Renee, Scott, are you ready to present?
Yep.
And maybe Paul, stop sharing the screen, please.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to start with a quick introduction of the company and what we do, and then I'm going to quickly hand the presentation off to Scott to continue with a very interesting demo he has prepared for us today. Okay, let's click here. So Atmodyne is a startup company created by healthcare and software development professionals. And our goal is to create a low-code, zero-code platform for data capture with healthcare data as a first-class citizen. That being said, we also aim for it to be industry and standard agnostic. So part of the product is a tool set for plug in different standards. Our team has extensive experience delivering solutions across all levels of the healthcare spectrum and through all kinds of clinical settings. So, but the product you're going to see today is kind of a reification, a distillation of our experience doing that, and I'm really running this systems on the ground. What we are showing you today, it's a technology preview of Procyon, which is our data capture platform. The goal for Procyon is to create a platform that can facilitate rapid form building with a range of value-adding features baked in, like the ability for multiple collaborators to simultaneously edit the structured document while ensuring that the document remains consistent and that the business rules are applied in a transactionally safe way. We also want to bake in online data analytics, the ability to render the documents through multiple simultaneous renders, like maybe a web page and mobile native applications, and make them interact nicely. We want to be able to plug in multiple simultaneous storage backends, among other features. Some of you have seen previous iterations of this, and and most of you will get a better idea once you see Scott's demo. So the platform is functionally comprised of a form builder with an UI builder, a model editor, and a rules editor, a forms manager that takes care of the plumbing for collaborative editing, document lifecycle management, and the enforcement of UI rules. And the third component is a data flow engine that looks after workflow coordination, the enforcement of business rules, ingress and egress of data, and integration endpoints. The main architectural feature that we want to point out is related to the way the different components of the product are decoupled. The description of the form, of the UI of the form, the model that backstops it, and the business rules are all expressed as data and are easy to store, transform, and operate on. They can be versioned and evolved independently of one another, and that helps you sort of protect the investment you have done after a long period of development for an app. And it lets you protect it against syntactic drift and semantic drift. As you know, as we run these systems, the way things are represented tends to change. Like, I don't know, the FHIR standard is evolving, and at the same time, what we want to signify with the things we put in the forms drifts as well, changes in meaning. For instance, since last week, an obese patient has a different set of metrics in Canada than it did 2 weeks ago. So a way to encode all of that and also to facilitate that that information to travel with the data is one of the goals of the platform. I'm going to hand off to Scott for the demo. And I guess as questions come up, we will fill them. Let me relinquish control.
Excellent, thanks. All right, let me get this sharing all set up. Make sure I have everything in its proper place. Okay, and sharing. Desktop or sharing. There. Okay, so here we have kind of like a splash page for the prototype. The core of the platform is will begin managing forms themselves. These forms will then you'll be able to publish versions against which you can build documents, which will serve as ad hoc data collection sort of applications, as well as communication with various upstream and downstream systems. For example, a FHIR store like 8box or Smile. So what I'm going to do right now is create us a form to demonstrate the workflow. We're going to do a simple BMI collection, and we're going to populate patient information from FHIR itself, and then we're going to publish back out a set of observations. Okay, so this is the form editor as it stands when you first create a document. We have a number of editing tabs. It's a little bit noisy, but there's a lot going on. Obviously, as development continues, this will be streamlined significantly. So there are 3 sort of main pillars, as Renee pointed out. So there's our model and data declaration, along with sort of events and rules that are related to the data. And then there's also views that are declared for rendering that data in various ways. In addition, there are import and export mappings, and this is for getting data in and pushing data out to external systems such as a FHIR store. So let's get started by creating a patient with, and I won't do this for every single path. I have some pre-baked stuff, but so we're going to add a weight field, and here we have some attributes we can edit. By default, fields are text, but we can assign types easily enough. And then we can easily reference these from the body of our view, like so. Emacs key bindings. Unmatched delimiter, of course. There we go. And yeah, so we have a weight field here, and we can see in kilograms, we have a weight field here. We can also, as another user, pretend that we're locking this field, and we can see if there was another user on the network editing this field, we would be unable to edit it, and we would see a helpful pop-up notification saying, hey, it's being edited. This is, trivial. We're collecting one field and doing nothing with it. But let's get a little bit more advanced and let's calculate, or let's collect 3 different fields. So here we've included a second field for height and a third field for BMI. We have yet to add any events, but now we can see that we can edit height and BMI. Well, BMI is read-only right now because we're going to be generating it, but we can edit weight and height independently. And as expected, locks would be independent as well. Now let's move on to the third version that I have pre-made, which includes a rule for calculating BMI, as well as a UI element that responds to BMI's value. So it'll pop up a summary, or not a summary, a prompt for a caregiver to interact with the patient and notify them of certain things. So as we can see, our patient is 1 meter tall and 122 kilograms. This is incredibly unhealthy. So we have a simple and small pop-up for our healthcare provider that says patient's BMI is 122, which is well above the healthy range of 18 to 25. Please provide them with a weight management brochure. And as far as the declaration goes, all we've done is in our model, we have our height, weight, and BMI defined, as you can see. We have an event with a declaration that is a closure function. We do as much as we can to sort of help users along, and there will be pre-built functions as well as we build out sort of a library of standard components and computations a user might want to do. As well, we have reactions, which are more generic computations that are read-only and are referenced from the view directly. So here we're specifying a display property on an HTML div. Now, these properties don't have to work directly with HTML. We intend to allow users to build their own widget libraries, or we will provide a standard one with more semantic and domain-specific attributes. But for the time being, for the purpose of demonstration, we have chosen to work directly against an HTML DSL. So that's how we've got the UI reacting. Still pretty simple. One thing that I should demonstrate as well is that if we were to go to kilogram and we were to lock kilogram, you can see because we have a rule defined that relates weight in kilograms and height in meters to BMI, we are unable to edit any of these fields. The user doesn't have to do any specification of this. It's just the rule itself that is aware of this relationship. Okay, so now in the next version, what have I got for us? Oh, yes, okay. This is the, we're going to pull a few attributes from a patient and inject them into an ad hoc data model. So another thing that this is useful for is that we can have an existing form where this data would be input manually. So for example, patient name and family name and medical record number. There could be an existing form built on this platform that isn't FHIR aware or isn't talking to external systems that is sort of a stopgap so that you can get something out the door without worrying about integrations and sort of organization-wide protocols. But we can also, with a simple declaration of an import resource, which you can see here, we have a FHIR resource that is a patient, and we have an ID, which is the FHIR entity ID, as a key in our document, as well as a set of mappings from model IDs to FHIR paths in our FHIR document. So if we click on select a patient here, we will get a pop-up that will show us a list of all of our patients in our current FHIR store. There's only a few because it's a dev instance, but this could be queried and searched as well. So let's select our patient Roloff Olaf. And so we can see that patient F201 has been selected, and we can see that our names have been populated. Pretty cool. We have that all done. Now that we have that, we can also react to that as well. So we probably don't want to display those fields or allow them to be edited while we don't have a patient. So we're just going to simply add a reaction that says if we have our patient ID, then we will not display our component. So as we can see here, we just have like display patient selector as a reaction and display form as a reaction. And in our schema editor, we can see in reactions, we have very simply just a Boolean for if the patient is selected or not. And then we have a transitive reaction here that depends on another reaction. So we can easily chain these computations to reuse the logic that we've built. And you can use this for business specific logic that you don't want to write back to the actual data model itself. So it could be sort of transient computations, say like a risk assessment or something, or like a risk rating that might be used to inform what parts of a form you might fill out. And yeah, so we are reusing both of those there. And now if we are to go to our document and reset its states, you can see if we open this form as a patient, all we see is, okay, first we got to select a patient. Nothing else is available. As soon as we do, we don't have to worry about patient selection. It's all done for us, and now we have to input our data. And then finally, the final step that we need to perform is an export of this data. Very important. If no one else knows what we're doing, we're just kind of talking to ourselves. So the final demonstration that we have is how the exports work. So exports are done with a data templating pattern where we have a list of templates that will be published as FHIR resources. And FHIR being encoded as JSON has only a few primitive types. Eden, which is a data specific or a data DSL enclosure, has richer types like namespace keywords and different types of collections. So we can pattern match on those entries and inject accordingly. So we have a function here for generating just a random UID for observations. We have a function for getting the current date. And then we also have at the top values, which are snippets of the document that you might want to or snippets of the FHIR resources that you might want to correlate across them. So for example, we have our subject. It would be a pain in the ass to specify our subject specifically for every single template. So you can see we're just reusing values subject. Similarly, the date that it's effective, we want it to be the exact same. We don't want if we submit this at 11:59 p.m., we don't want that to change because of some race condition. Similarly, onerous things that will be known ahead of time, such as codings, we can avoid redundancy there as well. So now that we have our height, weight, and BMI, we can export our BMI observations. And we can see that we've gotten a list of IDs and resource types that have been published to FHIR. We're not currently listening for those observations here, but I will hand it over to Renee to show you that those exist in our FHIR store very quickly. I guess before that, actually, I should open up any questions about the live demo, if anyone has anything that they'd like me to go over again or in more detail.
Is this demo is publicly available somewhere? Could I test it on my own or?
So it's not currently publicly available. It will be soon. I'd say a couple of months, a month or two. we'll have sort of a limited access demo. We want to build out some of the ergonomic features, like building the model out. We want to improve this as well as providing a richer set of standard widgets. But once we have that, we will be making it publicly available as sort of a try it out cloud demo.
Okay, thank you. And another question, who is the target user for this interface? Because sometimes I see some closure code, some functions defined inside the data. So it's a bit tricky to understand who is the end user. Because if I have to write closure, I prefer to write it in the Emacs.
Yes, for sure. Same with me. So the target audience is sort of semi or non-technical users. The plan is to have predefined standard behaviors as well as a translation layer between a more user-friendly DSL, a more non-technical friendly DSL, and basic closure operations like arithmetic, string operations, etc. So that someone with Excel level capabilities can define these kinds of data relationships.
That's pretty much the level of user we are targeting.
We're looking at Excel power users. So, and the idea is that people would be able to build ad hoc forms as small to medium sized organizations that don't do a lot of, organization-wide data unification, but then as they scale up or as their jurisdictions enact standardization efforts, it's easy enough for them to use their existing tools and adapt to a more integrated and robust system with minimal friction. Because a lot of the issues that we've encountered in our history in the industry is you have excellent devs or excellent semi-technical users who are building great rapid tools. And they're using things like, Typeform or, Google Forms type things, or they're using their favorite web framework. And it's awesome and clinicians love it, but that data just sits there. And so we kind of want to find something to bridge that gap.
That's in a nutshell the idea. It might be unfortunate. I don't think it is, but it might be unfortunate that the kind of user that drives clinical workflows is this enterprising user that has zero knowledge of a standard, but have an extremely good knowledge of the pains, the vicissitudes they go through to deliver care, and they want a solution, and they are not afraid to get their hands dirty and build something that works for them. But the side effect of that is that all healthcare everywhere is littered with the corpses of those little silos of data. And one thing that this affords you, for instance, is that you remove the developer as a source of impedance when delivering a solution. You can provide the mapping after the fact, since the artifact to specify the data model on the data you will be collecting and the UI is decoupled from the standard. There is a mapping layer there. You can tell the user, go to town, collect the data you want to collect, and then after the fact, you organize an effort to move all that corpus into your data lake or your data pond or whatever by providing is a path for the removal of entropy, for adding structure to what was collected. That way, everybody is happy. The person that is reporting on the data to the ministry on the right, and the person that is caring for patients on the left.
Is the definition of the questionnaire actually a FHIR questionnaire? There's a lot of stuff here that...
So
not
It
really
is,
fixed
it is standards agnostic. As I said, you provide that after. And what the quick demonstration that Scott produced, it did a simple mapping between observation and whatever that person collected there, you know, like a vital signs.
But it means
could be
I would
something
need
else.
a different data storage for these questionnaires. It will be not sufficient to have just a FHIR repository.
You can.
That's
It is
correct.
sufficient
So
if you want it like that. The only requirement in that case is that you do the mapping effort a priori. The product comes with a bitemporal database that affords you to persist all your data as it is produced. But for instance, as a sidecar to that, for the purpose of the demo, Scott tagged along a FHIR repository with the shape of a box.
Yeah.
But that was not a FHIR questionnaire.
Correct. It's not a FHIR questionnaire.
Okay.
But it can be. The problem we're looking to solve is the problem of the clinic.
No, that's fine. That's why there were just features here that were not part of the SDC. That's why I was not sure that. Okay.
Oh no, definitely no.
Yeah.
This yeah. So we hope that we will participate in one of the connectathon with an SDC plugin for this, and that would show with more clarity how those interactions work.
Okay. Cool.
All right. I guess I'll hand it over to Renee for close up, or like quick summary and further questions about the slides. If I can find which tab I have my chat open on. Where did I put it? Hello. Is it hiding? Oh, I guess it's okay. It was the overlay hid the actual.
Irene, you want to close the presentation, or shall we?
If any further questions from
any questions?
from the people.
No questions I see in YouTube chat, so we can discuss it also after the last presentation as well. So let's move on. Our last speaker for today is Stoyan, and they have a very special company. They just won a People Choice Award at the recent FHIR Dev Days. So exactly with the product, I believe he will be presenting, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's all yours, please.
Okay, thank you. So I will show a quick short presentation, and then I will do some live demonstrations. The FHIR Power Tools that we presented at the FHIR Dev Days. So if you were there and saw the presentation, I do apologize. There were some overlaps, but probably not everyone was on the FHIR Dev Days. So the FHIR Power Tools, why they came to life and what was the need of them. And that starts with our company, Nurse IT Institute. And as you can see from the name and from my co-founder, we actually didn't start it with developing FHIR tools. We just wanted to use the latest state-of-the-art technology. And with my background, 20 years in healthcare informatics, I was really happy to bet my future or the future of the companies on FHIR 2015. That was a really risky bet at that time. But we say, okay, we want to create a new generation of nursing documentation solutions for hospitals, and we will put everything on FHIR. So our main product is a nursing documentation. It has a lot of very nice tools. It has a visual body description where nurses can document wounds or pain or whatever. And of course, we have a lot of questionnaires. So as every other area in the hospital IT, with nursing, you have a lot of questionnaires, and they are mostly not standardized. Every hospital has their own. We did try to standardize things and introduce evidence-based assessments and patient histories and stuff like this. But it's mostly questionnaires and a lot of PDFs. So we have tools with FHIR, but still we have only the base description. We had to do something about it. And since our project manager and product managers are mostly nurses, and it was out of question to give them any type of scripting, and we did try to train them at the beginning with XML and JSON and all this stuff. So it was so tricky, and it took so much time that we actually said, we need tools. There was nothing on the market. Let's build some of them. And that's how the FHIR Power tools were born. And with the time, actually, a lot of them appeared. So questionnaire viewer, builder, response browser, report builder, code system editor, and stuff like this. So I will jump quickly over the different tools and then go with more detail and live presentation in the questionnaire builder.
Stuart, just in case, you're not sharing anything right now. You understand that?
Sorry?
You're not sharing your slides or anything. That's like...
So I did the same. I'm not sharing my slides. What do you see?
Yeah, sorry about this. Yeah, we're seeing your desktop.
But actually, I explicitly selected screen. Oh, he changed my screens. Why? Okay, sorry about that. For some reason, Zoom changed my screens. I'm really sorry. So I will quickly jump at the beginning. So here, you see slides now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about this.
Okay, so that was me and my co-founder, and here a couple of screenshots from the application, as I mentioned, some questionnaires that are part of it, and printing engine for reporting and PDFs. So that's where the need for additional tools arrived, and we built lots of them. So as I said, here's some screenshots from the different tools, and then I will go in live demonstration. And the questionnaire builder, it's a WYSIWYG editor for questionnaires that can be designed and created with drag and drop. The questionnaire viewer is a runtime engine, similarly to what Paul showed. Then we have the report builder and the report viewer. The report builder is a desktop application because it was very tricky to create a pixel perfect design engine. But the report viewer, the generated reports are done web-based. Code system editor and value set editors are also Smart on FHIR apps that allow for quick management of code systems and value sets directly on the FHIR server. And we also have some integration with the simplifier. For example, the questionnaire viewer, code system editor, and the value set editor can be directly called out of the simplifier. So if you have questionnaires there, as in this case, it can jump directly there. So there are other tools. I will go into them in a minute. But the official website is the FHIR Power tools, FHIRpower.tools. And if you go there, you can see some short video presentation about it. And there is also a short description of the tools. And you can try directly from here the questionnaire builder. And since it is not now really connected to your own FHIR server, we're working on infrastructure where we can actually provide a shared FHIR server infrastructure where you can also store your questionnaires. You can actually click here, work on live, offline, and then load your questionnaire resource. Or I will demonstrate now connecting to my FHIR server, what are the features of the designer. So once we're logged in, it loads all the questionnaires now with state active. So those are different questionnaires I have here. And if I select a particular one, it will load. And now we have a tab with different options. Now we can see here the properties. Those are the main properties of the questionnaire resource. We have here the WYSIWYG designer. And the WYSIWYG designer is structured basically as a renderer, and it even runs most of the rules. So you can actually live test it. Here, example, COVID-related data. Here you see this button, ignore enable whens. So once you're designing, you actually want to see your rules, the fields that will disappear. And if you turn it off, you can actually also test how this works. And when it's ignored, you can actually see all the fields so that you can work on them. It is easy to use interface. Those are the items, the groups. Every group or item have a range which allows to define particular properties. We have built some very often used extensions already, like the translations. Every item or option can have translations of different languages. And here, if I take this one, we can see here is the type, here required, in, on, read only, repeats. The translations are here. We can add different languages. Here we can see the options, and we can add new options, or we can also fill the data that's required. Here also added the ordinal value extension, which we found very handy. Very often we need not only the display, but the ordinal value, so that's basically built in. The hidden value is also here, the standard extension provided. And what we found particularly useful is the enable when handling, which is really handy here, because once you define the enable when, you can actually visually select what question it depends on. Here it depends on the did you travel during your past 4 weeks. And then it will automatically take all the options from this particular question and will give you here the options. So if we take another, let me see, another choice here, it's another choice, so you have different options here, and that's why it takes really a short time to create, fulfill, and actually live test your enable when buttons or rules. There were a number of other useful features here. For example, we have, let me see where I can see this. I think it was this one. I'm sorry, half of it is in German because it's mostly German implementation, the forms. We have the initializations here. You can initialize the fields, pre-fill the fields with FHIR path expressions. We actually have created here a semantic shortcut of the FHIR path expression, because we were lazy every time to write, if a questionnaire needs to be populated with fields of another questionnaire, you have to always write .item where link ID equals particular name. So we just actually created like a extension of the FHIR path where you can just write the link ID and then the value, and it will automatically internally convert it to the right FHIR path expression, so that the questionnaire itself stays compatible with the standard, but it is a shortcut. It's easier for the user to work with it. The other tabs that we have here is the source code. So we can actually here copy paste, apply source code, load from file, download from file. And here's some other useful tools for the link IDs. There is a data structure just for the link IDs. you can see here which language have been properly translated. So if we have a complicated form with a lot of languages included, it's really difficult to see if there are some gaps. So that's a tool here. You can also filter items if you know that you're working one particular group. You can just filter to those and then just work on them. Or you can actually even export the list or sort them so that it will give you some debugging options. What we also did here with the source, we noticed that a lot of people actually, when they create questionnaires, skip the link IDs. And the link IDs actually needs to be available, so it will automatically generate link IDs if you load file that is kind of broken questionnaire, and will give you the opportunity to work with it. So as I mentioned, if we have here a questionnaire from SimpliFHIR, I'm just right now not logged in, and I actually broke the API call. I need to call SimpliFHIR because we updated with some FHIR supports. But at the end, you can just call it the same similar call that Paul had with his software, and it will automatically render your questionnaire, so you can actually run it, use it, and create questionnaire responses. We're using this ourselves in our products, so it's eat your own dog food. That was a short overview of the designer. Let me see what we have here. There are some other tools, something we call Smart Dashboard. It's an application that can run iframes, which can host other Smart on FHIR apps. So if you have CDS hooks or some other tools that you want to present, you can plug them together. And it also has own template language for layout configuration. So if we need some simple information, the markup language allows to directly query a bundle with FHIR path and then just present it. It saves a lot of time to actually write custom Smart on FHIR applications. So where we now we have full STU3 support, working a lot on R4 support. We have partial support for the structured data capture, but working very intensive right now that we have a draft specification to support as much as possible the extensions there, so that you'll be able to build and test your questionnaires with what to see is what to get. And then, just plug them as a Smart on FHIR app or as a library in your own apps. We're moving everything to Vue.js. We were using Aurelia.js, that's a JavaScript framework that was kind of popular a couple of years ago, but missed to gain traction. So, and we have very good experience with the Vue.js, so that's why we're moving in this direction. So that's for me for now, but the questionnaire builder is there. I will be updating to the new version in the next couple of days, and we'll post in the Zoom chat once we have it, and then we will be doing regular updates every 2 weeks.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. So, first of all, do you support FHIR path-based enable expression?
Yeah. We're using the FHIR path GS library, and all features that are available there are supported. So we can calculate BMI on the fly, basically, with the FHIR path expressions.
Nice. Another question, maybe you thinking about how to represent FHIR path expression kind of visual way, because personally I see that you are creating a platform for right number of users, you already do some simplification in FHIR pass, like you are using ID and then simplified pass, yeah. And maybe a next step should be create a kind of visual interface for FHIR pass. Maybe you thinking about it or maybe not. So could you please share?
Yeah, but I think Paul is more the the specialist in this area.
I like your idea of the ID dot and then some attribute of the question. I think that's a very good approach.
We will surely help and collaborate. I think visual FHIR path expression builder, it's something that should belong to the community, and it should be a community effort, I think, because it's not that simple. Yeah, but for the most part, actually, when you do pre-population, there are some patterns that are most likely easier to implement than others. What kind of stuff you can do with FHIR path? I think it's not possible to completely visualize it, but for the most common patterns, it's surely worth the effort.
Yeah.
Something like putting two names together, like a first name and second name, or some simple expressions, or just simple comparison if that field bigger than that field. There are already libraries that can do some visual stuff like this, and maybe we can combine them. It's a good idea. I'll look into this.
Is any of your stuff going to be like open source or?
It's free to use.
Okay.
I haven't figured out the open source part yet because we're in the middle of translating the code, and there was a lot of proprietary code there because 2015 when we a lot of things that are now part of the structured data capture we just did with our own extensions or just put there because we didn't really understood it at the beginning. So we have some incompatibilities in our rendering engines, but what the designer produces is standard. So we are moving with big parts of it. It's actually not really needed for the questionnaire builder to be open source because once it's free to use, you can just use it, and the product that it generates, it's should be at least a standard questionnaire. And that's why I'm also really interested to have this kind of standard sets of questionnaires that we can test if we can properly import and then also properly export. For the rendering engine, as I said, I'm not sure right now. It's not that easy to build a complete rendering engine that handle everything of the structured data capture, as you surely know. But this got some traction and people are interested, and I get requests. I'm hiring a new developer, so I'll try to put as much as resources on our side as possible, and then try to convince our investors that's maybe worth open sourcing it.
Well, free to use is certainly very good too. I think that's great that you're able to do that.
So we're preparing kind of a website where you can log in, register, and then you get your own private FHIR server at the backend. So you can actually manage your questionnaires and what I basically did with my demonstration right now, that you can have your accounts. And I'll think about maybe there will be like an enterprise version when you want to build this in your own on-premises installation for in-house using or something. Maybe that would not be free, but there will be a public version accessible and free to use.
And this is great. Thank you. Any other questions from any speakers to any speakers? Like we have one more question in the chat I found, which we missed. Maybe somebody want to pick it up. Orlando is asking what are the guidelines for feeding data back to the EHR. Let's say the information is outdated and I updated in the questionnaire response. should it update the original data? Who would like to respond to that?
Well, in ideal world, the original data will be the questionnaire response, and there will be a new version of the questionnaire response. So it depends on the EHR integration, and the most EHRs, I'm not aware any EHR integrating questionnaire responses directly. Maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah, I mean, with structured data capture, when you're doing extraction from a questionnaire, so you fill out a form, it loads a bunch of data from the EHR, and then you change some information. So you change your phone number, you change whatever. There is the possibility of the extraction process being designed to allow you to write back to the original resources that you extracted from. Whether you want to do that or not, and whether the EHR will let you do that or not is an open question. But the mechanism for doing it is there. And it would really depend on what is the context in which the questionnaire is being used, who is using it, and is it appropriate to update those records or not. But it moves into a policy question as opposed to can the technology do it? The technology can do it if you decide that it's a good idea.
Oh, thank you, Lloyd. So any EHRs, like among the large ones are supporting questionnaire response right now, or do they have anything like this?
So, well, there's a whole lot of EHRs out there. I'm most familiar with the ones in the US, even though I'm based in Canada. And one of the major pushes for the Argonaut project last year was doing some basic questionnaire stuff. But their level of support is pretty low. They certainly do not support most of what is in structured data capture. They have the ability to render and do direct entry for very simple forms. They do not have any support right now for extraction and population and that sort of stuff. Their general notion around a lot of that kind of content is that that's a role for smart apps as opposed to something that the EHR should be taking on itself, which in the near term is probably reasonable because what our expectations are for forms, what is best practice around FHIR forms, what is the full range of rendering capabilities and rules capabilities, et cetera, that we can expect to see in healthcare commonly isn't necessarily well understood yet. So it's much easier to iterate that kind of stuff in a smart app than it is to iterate it when it's built-in functionality within the EHR. So they have support for adaptive forms in Argonaut because that offloads all over to somebody else. And they have support for very simple forms, and the rest of it is smart apps, stuff like what Paul has built, which you can then plug in and launch arbitrary forms with an application that knows how to deal with them.
Is there actually an implementation guide for the Argonaut forms?
Yep. It is somewhere. If you go look in the list of implementation guides, the link at the bottom of the core page, you should be able to search on questionnaire and be able to find Argonaut questionnaire.
Cool.
It's STU3, right?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I thought it was R4, but I'm not positive.
All right. Any other questions? Tricky questions, like from one speaker to another speaker, like. If not, probably let's say another time that there's gonna be a virtual HL7 FHIR connectathon around September 9th, as far as I understand. Last time I missed the connectathon because I used to have like that it was on Saturday and Sunday. Now I think it's not on Saturday and Sundays anymore. There is a Zulip chat for SDC group, right? I think it's called questionnaire group. Is it correct? Yeah, so everybody is welcome to join.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody is welcome to join this group, continue this conversation. You can definitely reach out to all the speakers, like there were contacts during the meetup, and you can reach out to all of them, I think, in the over Zulip chat very easily. We now started having our meetups regularly, which I'm very happy about. So anybody who wants to present, on any FHIR related topic with any FHIR related work project, which can be interesting to community, please reach out. We'll try to have you presenting. And perhaps thank you for being with us today. Thank you for all the speakers, Lloyd, Ilya, Stoyan, Paul, Rene, Scott. Thank you so much, and bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Sobal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.